Welcome to Aaron Mahnke's Cabinet of Curiosities, a production of iHeartRadio and Grim and Mild.
Our world is full of the unexplainable. And if history is an open book, all of these amazing tales are right there on display, just waiting for us to explore. Welcome to the Cabinet of Curiosities. Many young people long for adventure. They're stuck in school or menial jobs, and they want a life where they're constantly on the move and experiencing new things. Young adult novels and role-playing video games cater to this desire, featuring protagonists who come from humble beginnings and are swept up on epic journeys after a chance encounter. In 1835, one young English aristocrat received a real-life call to adventure. He set out on a journey that would change his life and the world. James had never been good at school. After dropping out, he joined the East India Trading Company Army, but soon took a bullet to the chest while in battle and was sent home to heal. He was bored and listless. The army had shown him some fascinating parts of the world, but he hadn't been free to explore it. He wanted to get back out there on his own. When his father passed away in 1835, he received a massive inheritance. This was his chance to do something with his life. And so he did what any young man would do, and he bought a 142-ton schooner called the Royalist. The large ship had 6 cannons and could accommodate dozens of crew members. James hired some men, purchased a ton of supplies, and then sailed toward Asia to find adventure. In 1841, he took on a request from the British governor of Singapore, who wanted James to travel to Brunei to thank the Sultan there for the rescue of some British soldiers lost at sea. But like any good adventure, this simple request quickly turned into a larger ordeal. When James and his crew arrived in Brunei and met with the Sultan, they learned that this kingdom was beset by pirates. And so the Sultan offered James governorship over the province of Sarawak as a reward if he could put an end to the marauders. James teamed up with the Sultan's uncle, Hashem, and the two became friends, sailing the seas around Brunei and putting an end to the pirates. It was actually fairly easy with James's expensive ship. Once they found where the pirates were hiding, they could just blow them apart from the shore. And when James and Hashem returned to the Sultan, he gave James his reward, and James thus became the Raj, or the Prince of Sarawak. But this put the British in an awkward position. Brunei is a small country on the northern tip of the large island of Borneo. Sarawak, by comparison, takes up most of the northern coast of the island. At the time, the Dutch controlled the southern half. And so the British were grateful to James because he was keeping the Dutch from gaining control of the island, but at the same time, he was now a private British citizen with full control of his own Southeast Asian country. His actions could put the British into conflict if he wasn't careful. And as you can imagine, James wasn't careful. He went about securing his kingdom in the most aggressive manner possible. He wiped out dozens of pirate villages, and these weren't just little caves full of stereotypical eye-patch-wearing rogues. They were communities with women and children. James killed them by the hundreds, but he saw it as a necessary evil. The pirates threatened British shipping in the area. Additionally, a lot of the local tribes were engaged in human trafficking and headhunting, the practice of cutting off the heads of your enemies and shrinking them down to keep as trophies. James put an end to a lot of these practices, although, again, he was meeting extreme violence with his own version of extreme violence. In 1848, he was knighted by the English crown. Although he had been aggressive in his tactics, he had furthered British interests and avoided any conflict with the Dutch. His entire journey is obviously a pretty blatant example of colonialism. His desire for adventure led to the deaths of many, but some good did come from all of this violence. James's descendants ruled over Sarawak for 100 years, and this allowed the people there to maintain their own unique culture, free from occupation by the British, the Dutch, or other nearby nations. That was until 1944, when the country was occupied by Japan. However, once liberated, the people of Sarawak were free to join a federation of other nearby island nations, becoming the nation that we know today as Malaysia. Curiously, this was only possible because of the actions of one man from half a world away. His desire to get out of the house and do something with his life permanently altered an entire part of the globe. In 1879, Edgar Degas spent 4 nights at the circus studying the routine of a high-flying aerialist named Miss Lala. He sat with his sketch pad, sketching out images of her whirling through the air, performing death-defying stunts. Several months later, at the 4th Impressionist exhibition in Paris, he debuted a stunning portrait called Miss Lala at the Cirque Fernando. His painting depicted a graceful black woman in a brightly colored costume high above the circus floor, dangling from a rope, held not in her hand, but in her teeth. The painting was so captivating that a well-known art critic at the time said it was among Degas' most striking and complex achievements. But while the art world has long marveled at this painting, history has nearly forgotten the woman who inspired it. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? But if that's the case, you'll need a whole museum to cover the fascinating life of famed circus performer Miss Lala. Before Miss Lala stunned circus-goers, her name was Olga Brown. Records on her early life are sparse, but it's believed that Olga was the daughter of 2 fairground artists, Marie-Christine Borchardt, a white woman, and Wilhelm Brown, a freed slave who had made his way from the United States to Poland in the early 1800s. Olga was born in Poland, probably around 1858. And because she grew up around the fairgrounds, she had a keen interest in performing. At the young age of 9, her mother signed her into the circus, where she quickly proved adept at the high wire and the trapeze. This was particularly because Olga was small in stature, but muscular, with broad shoulders and strong legs. She could fly through the air with amazing height and was a perfect fit for the human cannonball act. That trick was a crowd favorite, as you might imagine. At the start of every performance, Olga would curl into a ball and roll down into a large wooden cannon at the edge of the circus ring. The cannon would boom, and Lala would be ejected from the barrel and launch across the high-top tent, doing acrobatics as she sailed through the air before finally landing in a net on the other side of the ring. It soon became clear that Olga was a rising star, no pun intended. The circus began billing her as a main event, but as so often happened to black women at the time, they didn't just focus on her talent. They also exoticized her, calling her Miss Lala, Venus of the Tropics, or sometimes the African Princess. It was, without a doubt, fetishizing and othering to her. But Olga, or Miss Lala as she was known, never let the callous way she was built affect her ambitions. Throughout her teenage years, she performed in several different circuses and music halls across Europe, making a name for herself as the first-rate aerialist and acrobat that she deserved to be. But at the time, there was one circus act that always stole the show: iron jaw routines. Iron jaw performers were usually burly men with extraordinary neck strength. They would bite down on a leather bit attached to a rope and then pull, usually some kind of heavy object, across the ring. Crowds loved it, and Lala knew that she was strong enough to come up with her own version of an iron jaw routine. She practiced dangling from a rope clenched between her teeth until she was comfortable holding her own body weight. And then she practiced aerial poses, creating beautiful shapes with her body while literally flying by the skin of her teeth. And by the time she was 21, Miss Lala had developed something truly unique: an aerial iron jaw routine. She would walk to the center of the circus ring as the trapeze bar descended from the ceiling. She would then attach a hook to the trapeze and bite down, and then she'd be lifted into the very top of the circus tent. A swivel device on her hook allowed her to spin in the air 70 feet over the audience's heads. After that, she would lock her knees over the trapeze bar, the metal hook still dangling from her mouth, and she would use the hook to suspend 1 or even 2 other performers in midair to the roar of the crowds below. It was truly astonishing, especially given Miss Lala's size, and it didn't take long for word about her routine to spread, and Miss Lala toured Europe as a main attraction for the next 9 years. But even though Lala and her fellow performers were trained veterans, their jobs were still dangerous. Accidents happened. And in 1888, a stunt went wrong. One of Lala's friends fell from a trapeze and plummeted to her death. After that, Miss Lala backed away from performing. A few months after that, she met a fellow circus performer named Manuel Woodson. They got married and had 3 daughters, who went on to form their own circus troupe, the Three Casillas. But Lala faded from public life. Sadly, we're not sure where or when she passed away. But thanks to Degas, her likeness is forever immortalized. Her portrait hangs at the National Gallery in London, where she will forever stun adoring crowds who gather to watch her fly. I hope you've enjoyed today's guided tour of the Cabinet of Curiosities. Subscribe for free on Apple Podcasts or learn more about the show by visiting curiositiespodcast.com. This show was created by me, Aaron Mahnke, in partnership with How Stuff Works. I make another award-winning show called Lore, which is a podcast, book series, and television show, and you can learn all about it over at theworldoflore.com. And until next time, stay curious.